I'm getting the impression that increased rates are more to generate revenue from overwhelming costs incurred by poor planning. Do you really need the Third Street garage? But also, finally, I looked into this 9 p.m. because there's no logical reason to have meters that long in areas where we absolutely have no businesses or no meters at all. So you're punishing residents to gain more revenue for your parking authority because of your high costs. But I want to commend Mr. Haynes because he brings up a very interesting idea, and my thinking, in a sense, supports that idea. Well, those are essentially my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you,
Wilshire, 1898 now. I've got a whole bunch of comments here, and it's going to be a little disjointed. First question, I have a copy here of the draft parking study dated February 6th, 2018. Is there anything more recent than that?
I believe there is the final draft coming. I think there's even a draft version that might be. I can't say with certainty.
Okay.
There is a final that will be published.
Okay.
But it hasn't been yet.
Well, as an economist, I would appreciate a copy to look at.
It'll be posted on the website. That's just that.
So I have to print it out from the website?
Yes, it'll be posted on the website.
So how many pages will it be?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, at the library it's 20 cents a page. Gets a little pricey. I'm glad to hear that there is an acknowledgement that part of the reason we're here is the need for funds for the parking authority, due in part to the 17 million garage in the south side on which bond payments have to be made, and the upcoming possible renovation of the Walnut Street garage, which according to one newspaper article won't occur until 2023. And my thought is we can wait 5 years to consider that. I like the idea that Mr. Haynes increased, that he proposed, the increase he talked about in the fines. $10 is a bit low when somebody is parking at a meter all day. There's some wiggle room there. I had to pay $30 because I got caught in that operation over there on Seacon Place, which council heard about. The temporary parking during Music Fest for drop-off and pick-up for Uber and Lyft, but not for taxi cabs. And I didn't see any drop-offs or pickups there for Uber and Lyft. I spent some time there, and I saw people getting $30 tickets though. And as I left, the Jeep was headed back in that direction. I wonder how much money was raised. I understand that the meters we have now are capable of what perhaps is called dynamic pricing. The fact that not only could the meter rate vary by zone, by part of the city, but also by time of day. I think the overall goal should be that all of the spaces are occupied all of the time. Now, of course, that's an impossible goal, As Vince Lombardi once said, we strive for perfection, but we will not attain it, but in the process we will achieve excellence. And so I think that's something that should be seriously considered, combined with the fines that Mr. Haynes mentioned for all-day parking at a meter. You mentioned industry standards, and I wonder what these standards are and how they apply to Bethlehem and why they apply to Bethlehem.
They're general practices of the industry that we use as a reference source, and we temper each reference document or each reference material, each source to the community which we're working in. So it's not a blanket, just if it's good for them, it's good for Bethlehem. And I think, sort of that was borne out while we had that cross-section of peer locations that we evaluated. So we didn't prejudice ourselves just to a specific location that might be similar to the city of Bethlehem.
So you're saying that you modify the industry standards according to the locality?
We evaluate and analyze it, correct.
And it still doesn't tell me what the industry standards are.
I'm not sure if there's a specific standard which you're posing a question on. I try to answer it, but it's just
well, I don't know what standards you're referring to, so how can I cite a specific standard? To me, this smacks of speaking ex cathedra. After the meeting, I'll tell you a story about a Desmond study in Washington, D.C. about a parking garage, which I happen to be a member of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, which was elected, although unpaid. And I persisted in finding out the industry standard which was being invoked to justify a parking garage. And I'll tell you privately after the meeting where that standard came from and what was the date of the study it was based on. Because I don't want to be too confrontational tonight. Oh, and one final note here about, you say you want higher turnover. But the danger on setting rates too high is that you have, in effect, no turnover. People don't come. Now, here's one instance where I depart slightly from Mr. Haynes. The increase from $1 to $1.50, people might argue that it's minimal and therefore it does not affect behavior. But as an economist, I tend to think that there are some people who are on the cusp. Should I go into the city today or should I go to the mall? And they're instinctively weighing different advantages and disadvantages of the mall and the downtown. But the rates go up, and that for some people that might be just the disadvantage, just that little bit that tilts it in favor of the mall. So I think if you raise the rates, you'll get higher turnover, but you're also going to get some people who just won't come. And that's not a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the center? We're going to make our way over here, I promise.
Hi, I'm Paige Van Wert. I'm on council and I live at 42 West Market. I just had a couple questions for you. After reading this survey, it really stood out to me on page page 53 here. You were talking about the new street parking garage debt service, and you went through kind of the difficulties in paying off the loan, and it says, while the additional revenues expected to be generated by the garage will offset some of the cost until additional development occurs in the Southside study area, it will be necessary for the revenues generated by the rest of the BPA's asset to support this additional debt service, which I think is part of the onus behind this increase. But yeah, if you look at the page right before, 53, and you're talking about all of the different garage monthly rates, Bethlehem is almost half of your, the cost of a monthly parking garage ticket is half of, or what you would pay per month for a ticket is half what other cities are. Ours is $65, the other average is $118 a month. I don't understand why we're not raising parking garage monthly rates, especially for the larger businesses. I would not want to penalize smaller businesses, whatever that number of employees could be, but why are we not asking our larger utilizers like St. Luke's and Lehigh and the person who built the garage, who have basically subsidized rates, because we're not even paying what the monthly costs are to manage the garage, much less the sunk costs in constructions. Why was that not proposed in here?
I'm going to answer your question two ways, if you permit me. Almost in every municipality, parking improvements in the form of structured parking are not self-liquidating. You just can't generate the rates that are generally charged in most municipalities are not sufficient to cover